Rite Aid, where prices are low and quality is high, wants you to know Bristol Myers will mail you a check for up to $3 for purchasing 5 of these products. Details on this refund offer featured in our stores and newspaper ads. Save on Bufferin. The 60-tablet bottle is everyday low priced. Save on Ban Roll-On. This week the 2.5 ounce size is also everyday low priced. So pick up these and other Bristol Myers products at Rite Aid, where prices are low and quality is high.
Rite Aid. If you haven't heard of them, you probably don't live here or here. That's where you need to live. But for a time, they were one of the largest pharmacy retail chains in America, spread out across 15 states with more than 1,200 stores. They've existed for over half a century, but more recently, things haven't been looking so hot. Not so good. What's happening? You're a pharmacy. Are you sick? Do you need a prescription? Well, I mean, it's a little late for that, if I'm being completely honest, because they've entered liquidation. They are in the middle of closing the vast majority of their stores or trying to sell them. So yeah, things are not looking so good. But why? What happened? Were they outcompeted by other companies like CVS and Walgreens? Well, I mean, that was certainly part of it, but that wasn't really the main issue. No, Rite Aid's problem had more to do with just a lot of scandals and a lot of unnecessary lawsuits and just a lot of stuff that they didn't have to do. And yet they did. And here we are. But let's start at the beginning as always. Rite Aid was originally founded in Scranton, Pennsylvania by Alex Grass in September of 1962. His original store wasn't called Rite Aid though. He called it Thrifty Discount Center. A humble beginning, but he ran it quite well. By 1965, he expanded the chain to 5 additional states, and by 1968, he was starting to call it Rite Aid, taking the company public and eventually moving to the New York Stock Exchange in 1970. Just 10 years after the original store opened, they had 267 locations in 10 states. Rite Aid had ballooned in size to a significant degree, and I bet you're wondering why. Well, it's probably simply because Rite Aids were historically quite nice. They're just nice stores to be in. They feel clean and professional. Usually you go into a Rite Aid and it feels okay. And since you're going there when you're sick, needing medicine and other such, because it's a pharmacy, it's nice to walk into a place that feels, nice. Because you don't feel so nice usually. By 1981, they were the 3rd largest retail drugstore chain in the entire country, and in order to continue expanding, they proceeded to acquire a whole bunch of other companies, like People's Vitamin, Lane Drug, Reed's Drugstore, and by 1996, they had acquired Thrifty Payless, a 1,000-store West Coast chain. Rite Aid was on the up and up, and it didn't seem like anything could stop them, and truthfully, nothing really could as long as they kept doing what they were doing and not do anything very bad. But they wound up doing that exact thing. Because of course they did. See, Alex Grass had been running things pretty much this whole time, and he was very good at what he was doing, obviously. And despite becoming fabulously wealthy off of his business, he was known to be quite generous. He was a philanthropist, running around donating some of his vast wealth to various charitable organizations. But when he retired in 1995, his son, Martin Grass, took over. This is where things started going downhill. See, Martin was not his dad, at all. And not even just the fact that he was unable to handle managing the company, it's that he was a frickin' thief! In order to not actually do his job, but make it look like he was actually doing his job, he started cooking the books, overstating Rite Aid's earnings to the tune of $1.6 billion. This scandal on its own nearly tanked the entire company. Several other executives were also implicated, and Martin was fired because, what the heck, man? He would eventually be sentenced to 8 years in federal prison as a result of this ridiculous nonsense. It didn't help that behind the scenes, in addition to cooking the books, Rite Aid wasn't performing well. Again, Martin wasn't actually doing his job and actually running the business, and competition was getting pretty steep in the late 90s. They went through multiple management changes, trying to fix their problems, but they would continue to have issues, somehow always seemingly finding themselves in the middle of some serious lawsuits and legal problems. Because it wasn't just enough that they couldn't figure out how to get themselves back into profitability. No. That was bad enough. But they decided it was a really good idea to just maybe think that Martin had a good point. Maybe the secret ingredient was crime. No, you can run a legitimate business, you fools. But before we get to that issue, one of the legitimate ways they fixed their problems was to merge with one of their major competitors, Eckerd. This chain of drugstores occupied much of the eastern United States just as Rite Aid did, and they were also suffering problems, so they decided to merge. And maybe on paper it made sense, but that was a really bad call. Not really great. See, during the integration process, they suffered heavy losses, record-breaking losses for them, in fact. And I bet you're wondering, why? Well, it's because... Actually, it was very similar to Penn Central. Go figure. It was because Rite Aids and Eckerd's tended to occupy the same area. Some of the stores were almost right next to each other. You couldn't make them both Rite Aid. I mean, you could, but why would you? They're right next to each other. That makes no sense. Basically, they didn't bother to think about, oh wait, we actually have to close some of these stores until long after they should have. They did eventually do it and return to some stability, but it was a stupid mistake. And as for legal issues, well, beyond their former CEO Martin Grass being sent to jail, in 2004, Rite Aid had to pay out $7 million to settle allegations that they had been submitting false prescription claims to the United States government healthcare insurance programs. So that was good. In 2018, they paid out $18 million to settle a class action lawsuit involving employees who demanded seats. Yeah, they wouldn't give their employees seats while on the job, and had to pay $18 million over the... Just give them chairs! What is the matter with you? In 2019, they also had to deal with 2 consumer class action lawsuits, which alleged that they were overcharging customers' insurance companies for prescription drug purchases. Also, not a good look. And mind you, you have to remember, even if Rite Aid wins these lawsuits, fighting legal battles and attorney's fees are friggin' expensive. Like, this is not good. You can't constantly be dealing with this crap when you're just trying to stay oriented, and they barely were. All throughout the 2000s, in the background, the company was struggling and just treading water, and twice it was considered to simply sell off the company. Walgreens looked into buying them as early as 2015, and though they didn't actually merge and take the whole company, they did buy over 2,000 of their stores, the ones that were in the southeastern United States. In 2018, Albertsons tried to get a hold of the remainder of Rite Aid, but shareholders didn't approve of that, so that was canceled as well. And there were 2 more major legal issues that really tanked them. If these 2 things hadn't happened, they probably wouldn't have had to declare bankruptcy. They may not be in a super strong position, but they'd still be okay, because there were people who really liked going to Rite Aid, because they were nice stores. For one thing, in July of 2020, they were accused of racism? Yeah. So, here's what was going on. Rite Aid had rolled out a new facial recognition video surveillance system. It was an anti-theft device that used artificial intelligence and image feature extraction to recognize faces and catch thieves. That makes sense. However, Reuters news agency looked into this further and found that Rite Aid had installed the tech in stores that were located in areas where the majority of people around were not white. They implied that this was a result of racial profiling on the part of Rite Aid. But Rite Aid did respond, saying that the selection of locations was simply data-driven in terms of how many stores had suffered theft, and they hadn't even considered race in the matter. Regardless, for many, it wasn't a good look, and Rite Aid would opt to simply stop using the facial recognition software entirely, switching off the cameras. They were never sued over that, but they were sued over the opioid crisis. Ah, yeah, Yeah, that was a problem. They actually received multiple lawsuits involving the opioid crisis, mostly from government organizations, and pretty much all the lawsuits boil down to the same thing. Rite Aid was accused of constantly ignoring red flags in terms of how many prescriptions they were actually filling, not reporting them, not saying anything, not doing anything about this, just filling the prescription. And to be fair, that is what they're supposed to do, and the doctor wrote the prescription, so maybe look at the doctor too, but also Rite Aid just kind of did it without actually questioning anything for years. So, again, not really the best look, guys. Not really a fantastic appearance on your part, I'm just saying. The weight of these legal actions pushed them under the water. They couldn't tread anymore. And on August 25th, 2023, they would announce they were preparing to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protections, which they did on October 15th. They were delisted from the New York Stock Exchange, but this actually wasn't their end. They had secured a decent amount of extra financing, and it was only their first bankruptcy in their history. They could, in theory, survive it, though they did decide to close a number of locations. By September of 2024, they would announce that they were exiting bankruptcy and became a privately held company. Matt Schroeder, who was their former CFO, was given the role of CEO. However, this didn't last long. On May 5th, 2025, just about 2 months ago, Rite Aid filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protections again, showing assets and liabilities between $1 billion and $10 billion. What do you mean between $1 billion and $10 billion? That's that's $9 billion. You aren't sure? What are you doing? And over the following weeks, they began to lay people off and shut down various locations. At this point, pretty much all the Rite Aids are going away. Some might be sold off, though it's hard to say if anyone's actually going to buy them. As far as the prescriptions go, because you might be saying, well, they're a pharmacy, what do people need their meds? And yes, that is a fair problem. Rite Aid's handling this by basically giving the prescriptions over to their competitors. Whoever's closer is kind of the rule here. So, CVS, Walgreens, even some grocery chains will be taking over the prescriptions from the Rite Aid locations nearby, because the Rite Aid locations are no longer going to be there. And it's kind of frustrating to talk about this, because this all could have been avoided if you'd just done, the right thing consistently. Pretty much everything that went wrong here was not the result of people not liking Rite Aid, or even not wanting to go to Rite Aid. It's because they kept getting embroiled in legal trouble. Okay, their second CEO, the son of the founder, yeah, that didn't help. He was a jerk. He almost ruined the company. But also maybe don't get overzealous with your prescriptions. Maybe don't overcharge. Maybe, don't ignore red flag. Maybe give your employees chairs. These simple moral things. The people try to run around and say that capitalism is immoral and all this stuff, but the truth is, capitalism punishes you for being blatantly immoral pretty consistently. How many companies have we talked about now went under because they were doing crime? They were doing the wrong thing, and they lost everything over it. That's what happens, because the free market and the powers that be held them accountable for what they had been doing. Unfortunately, Rite Aid is going that exact direction, because if they had actually done the right thing in all those situations, they wouldn't have had legal trouble, and they could have just kept on going. Probably been fine. But no, that wasn't good enough. You had to be a criminal.
Solitary confinement for the criminal.